This is a historic moment. We are celebrating 40 years of Maruti rolling out its first car. In fact, we have the very first car that was rolled out over here, and we have the person behind it, the person who actually has been the driving force of the company for the last 40 years, right from day one. Mr. Bhargav, real honor to have you here. I mean, you were there when this car was launched. Mrs. Gandhi was there, Harpal Singh was there. It was a really quite a momentous occasion. Just your thoughts on it, and frankly, we are sitting here again with the very same car. We've had to flatbed it and get it to your residence on a truck for this moment. Just your thoughts on this really amazing moment. Who would have thought a small company like Suzuki making a small mark in India would be such a giant over here?
You're absolutely right, Hormazd, that in 1983 December, when this car was launched, I don't think there would be any person anywhere who would have had any idea of what this would lead to for the automobile industry in India, for the component industry in India, for manufacturing in India, for the whole concept of customer centricity, which we now all talk about, which was a virtually unknown word in those days, and how India would transform from a poor quality, poor manufacturing country into a country where its products, including a sophisticated product like a car, is accepted in the best of markets the world over. Today, quality made in India is acceptable anywhere.
Absolutely. But Mr. Bhargav, the story of this, what makes it really unique is this wasn't something planned. It wasn't part of, a nation's plan of, let's say, a 5-year plan or something like that, or a policy or a strategy. It was spontaneous. It was emotional. It just happened like that. I mean, from both sides, even the whole story. I mean, I think that's what really makes it unique. So, just your thoughts on that, because something like that it's literally a fairy tale kind of a story.
You're absolutely correct, because this was not a planned project. It had never had a plan even after it came into existence. Its growth, its success, all happened just because the people of this country had aspirations, wanted a better life, wanted better mobility. And Maruti, with the support of Suzuki, fortunately was in a position to understand and meet those aspirations in a manner which I think benefited both the consumer and the company and the country. And we went ahead the way we did. But I don't think any policy can take credit for it, or even Maruti can take credit for it. I think the credit goes to the entire nation.
But, just looking at the way it all happened, obviously very fast. From what I understand, it was less than 2 years from deciding with Suzuki as a partner to actually setting up a whole factory, a small supplier base, and rolling the car out. I think that in itself is a record, and to manage that back 40 years back must have been almost unbelievable.
Well, it was a huge challenge in those days, and we were all working under tremendous pressure to meet the deadlines. Mrs. Gandhi has set the deadline, and nobody in those days would lightly disregard anything which she wanted done, and especially in a matter relating to Maruti.
Very emotional.
Was very emotional, very close to her heart. It had nothing to do with government as such. It had to do with her personally.
So it was almost like a vanity project in a way, which pulled off.
It was, I don't know, it was something so close to her. Otherwise, the project would never have got going.
Right.
And therefore, we all felt that our future more or less depended on making sure that we met with what she wanted and didn't fail her.
But tell us about Suzuki's role in this, because clearly, you know, they didn't have that pressure from, you know, her side on you, but
I
obviously
think
they...
without what Suzuki did and the kind of support which they extended throughout, this would never have happened.
Right.
The very fact that Osamu-san decided to partner India and took no time in taking that decision, it's a major factor, because we met him in the month of March in Tokyo for the first time.
In 80...
April in 82.
In 82.
In April, we had signed an MOU. In October, we had signed the license agreement and the joint venture agreement. And in December, we had the project going. Now, all of this required tremendous support from Suzuki. We had to do our part. We obviously had a lot of things to do at the Indian end, but Suzuki had to do a lot of things at their end. And it was an excellent partnership arrangement. Both sides were committed to meet targets which a lot of people thought were impossible targets.
Right.
But it just shows what determination can do.
And you know, what has characterized the company really is productivity, efficiency, you know, that sort of excellence, really down to the people. It's quite fascinating that what was a majority public sector company could deliver that level of Zen-like efficiency. I'm not talking about the model, but you know, so I think what was it? Was it the training? What was the ethos or the molding of key people right from the beginning of the philosophy of manufacturing cars the Japanese way?
You know, Mr. Krishnamurti was the doyen of the public sector. He knew exactly what the strengths and weaknesses of the public sector were. After we had talked to Suzuki in Japan, and Suzuki had said that, look, you can't go the way of other public sector companies. For example, I'm a listed company, you have to make profits in Maruti. We said that we cannot work like any public sector company, we have to be different. And for a man like Krishnamurti to say that he is going to function differently in this PSU compared to the other PSUs which he had done so successfully was a huge, big departure on his part. He then said that go ahead and now find ways in which we can be different and we can follow Suzuki, we can learn from Suzuki, we can accept Suzuki's practices, find the ways of doing it. And that is what me and other members of the team had to do. So we all looked for all ways which we could manage within the regulations of the government, because we couldn't depart from the overall rules and regulations of the government. We had to follow those. But I found that within those regulations, there was enough leeway that if a company wanted to do things differently and to adopt a different set of practices and develop a different work culture, to develop different labor management responsibilities, different delegations of powers, different ways of rewarding performance and such things. There was no real limitation to it. So it's not that government regulations are as rigid as we think.
But you know, I think we talked earlier, you talked about training was really a key part of kind of establishing the work ethos, the DNA of the company. I believe a lot of training was done to the workforce and manpower in the early days. Tell us a bit about that, because I think they spent a lot of time in Japan. You know,
we needed to change people's thinking. We needed people to accept totally new ideas, like this business of management and workers working together in partnership. Now, it is an unheard of thought in India, because we had strikes and all kinds of violence, everything happening. To say that, no, we'll work together, nobody would believe. That and the whole system of people going and working in partnership with vendors, with dealers, these are all things which we said if people are going to accept, they will only accept if they see somebody is actually doing it. The saying, seeing is believing. So going by that concept, we arranged and Suzuki accepted without charge and violating all the terms of the agreement to accept a lot of people, initially managers and supervisors and others for training. They came back convinced that yes, there is a different way and it works well because the Japanese had reached the top of the car industry globally.
Right. And Mr. Bhargav, I think another thing that's come out of it is a completely non-existing supplier industry to one that today is world class. Clearly, I think Maruti can take full credit for really building a supply base and being fathering the supply base in India. And I think, would you say that's really one of the biggest kind of contributions Maruti has done to the industry?
Oh, undoubtedly, it's done both of us a lot of good. I don't think Maruti could be where it is today if it hadn't worked with the supplier base, to develop a supplier base and to work with them throughout to make them more and more aware of how to improve quality, how to reduce cost, how to get better technology and all of that. The supplier fraternity has responded superbly to this whole business. They have been quite amenable to understand and learn and change and do things. So the result is that we have grown, the supplier industry has grown. Today, India is as good a supplier base for components as any. Our exports are going up fast. I think we've crossed 20 billion US in terms of component exports. So I think it just shows the value of working together.
Right. And Mr. Bhargav, I want to talk about the future, but again, this has been, in a way, Maruti's journey has been your journey. You've been in the company even longer than the first car, 42 years from what I understand. What are your personal thoughts? And we are sitting here in 2023 celebrating this car. I mean, could you have imagined it in your wildest dreams? Obviously not. But what gives you the sense of satisfaction, and a few key things you felt that has put the company in this very enviable position today, despite so much competition, despite a very highly regulated automotive industry, which makes it much tougher going forward as well?
See, almost as far as I'm concerned personally, this all looks like a dream. I had, as a civil servant, no idea that I would ever end up where I ended up. I mean, it's just a fairy tale. But why Maruti got here and what has made us what? I think it's a lot of learning from Japan. But I think the biggest learning, which I think is the fact that all employees of a company, because of their experience in whatever they do, they acquire the knowledge and the ability to contribute to the further betterment of the company. It's the task of the management to create conditions which will motivate these people and train these people to understand how to use this learning and experience in a manner which will benefit the company. They will only do it if they think that benefiting the company is going to give them also some benefit out of it, and that they themselves will feel that they have become a little bit bigger because they are part of the growing organization. So partnership, again, I'll come back
right.
to that.
Partnership, I want to talk also even on Toyota. But before that, sorry to interrupt, you said, we learned a lot from Japan. But being very honest, a lot of Japanese companies have not been successful here. We've seen some of them really, they started off big, but really very small now. So what do you think, again, do you think it's that Maruti is more Indian in its approach and mindset and not bringing certain global perceptions to this market? Is that really the difference?
I think what you're saying is probably correct, because the ability to adapt the Japanese practices and Japanese thinking about how to manage companies and how to create partnerships to Indian conditions and to change the practices so that they're accepted by Indians and to find the methods by which the Indians will accept those and see that they work. For example, thinking long term. It's not a particularly Indian concept to think long term. We tend to think more It's not a Western concept. They think quarterly results. So these kinds of things from Japan, you have to make people gradually understand. So a lot of communication is required.
But a good point, thinking long term. Do you think the fact that, well, you've been around for 40 years, Mr. Suzuki's been around right since the beginning, and now there's a succession plan as well. Do you think that's really played a pivotal role? Because long term, there's continuity. There's not someone coming every 5 years doing his job and then he goes off to another market.
I think the continuity has been a major factor in what we have done, because
The continuity of leadership.
continuity of leadership, continuity therefore of the beliefs and the thinking and what has gone behind the philosophy of the company. Because you do need that people keep changing, that the new people also understand the fundamental philosophy which Maruti has, whether it is operating partnership with workers, with vendors, with dealers, the philosophy of frugal management, the policy of creating internal resources as a means of investment in growth rather than leveraging one's thing. These are all basic principles of management,
Right.
which you can accept or you can deviate and have different principles. We have our own set of principles which we followed.
Right. And Mr. Bhargav, we talked about continuity of leadership. You've been there for 40 years. You've been there with Mr. Osamu Suzuki's been there for 40 years. You've known him for 40 years. Please share us some thoughts about the man who really is really punched above his weight, created something spectacular over here. Obviously, you have a very close association with him. What are the few things that really makes him stand out and kind of literally be a giant in this field?
See, Mr. Suzuki is an exceptional man. I don't think it would be so simple for any other Japanese to accept what he accepted in those days. So,
What do you mean in terms of
even to join
Right.
the government of India in a car project in a public sector company, I think it required him to have a vision, a much longer term vision about the future of this country. And all
it was a gamble?
I don't know whether he took a gamble or whether he really thought that what was happening in India had to change.
Right.
That the automobile industry in India had to develop, that a country as large in India with a population then of maybe 80, 90 crores, 100 crores was not going to remain what it was. So whatever it was, he calculated, and he of course says that I took this decision because I thought that after I met Krishnamurti and you, that I can work with you guys.
Right.
And in a sense he was right, that we did carry out all that he suggested as the means of management, sure.
And very involved at that time. And
He was very involved. No
Right.
president of a company that I have seen has been as involved with his overseas investment as Suzuki has been.
Right. And moving forward, obviously, the Toyota partnership, which really is the future. Obviously, you can leverage a lot of the technology. I'm just saying, is this going to be the next phase of Suzuki? Obviously, looking at the future in that regard.
See, the automobile industry is bound to undergo a lot of changes in the coming decades
Especially regulations.
because of environmental regulations, safety regulations, and changes in the fuel use, and various things will happen. It does require a lot of investment in new technologies.
Right.
And Suzuki and Maruti are still comparatively small companies.
Right.
So this partnership with Toyota is a benefit to both. We get access to technologies. So, Toyota gets access to the largest and the fastest growing market which remains in the world.
Right.
Nowhere else in the world is this kind of market available anywhere.
Right.
And Toyota had been trying on its own, but I think they came to the conclusion that it would be of benefit to them and to Maruti and to Suzuki.
And I think between the two families, there's a lot of mutual respect. I think Toyota
That is their thing, but ultimately they take decisions on their business
Case.
prospects for the future.
Right.
They don't do it out of sentimental considerations.
Right.
And I think business considerations dictate that going forward, all three companies will gain by working together
Right.
and developing not only the technologies required to go forward in this industry,
Right.
but also to exploit opportunities in markets in other parts of the world.
Right.
Because, let's say electric cars. Manufacture of electric cars and the ability of customers to buy electric cars will, to a large extent, depend on the comparative economics of what is done. Maybe India can become one of the major countries to manufacture electric cars. And
Maybe small electric cars, which are everyone's
or
going
big
for big.
for that matter,
Right.
because we are in manufacturing terms, because of component manufacturing base in India and the development of the component industry, and the kind of practices of manufacturing which Suzuki has brought to Maruti and which Maruti has refined over the years.
Right.
With all those practices, we become a very low-cost manufacturer.
Right.
I mean, that's evident from our balance sheet.
Yeah.
And all of that can be of very great use
Right.
in the developing export markets.
You said, we could be a good exporter of electric cars. That's really a lot of people talking about the future. Now there's this whole thing about reduction of customs duties for imports, obviously with Tesla in mind. I mean, what is your view of that? Just to get your thoughts on,
No, there are not enough details available of what is planned.
right. No, but fundamentally, should duties be reduced on imports, because right now they're as much as a ICE vehicle?
There is no way of arguing that the existing duty levels are the correct duty levels.
Right.
Like import duties, like there's no way of arguing that the GST on cars, which exists in India, is the correct duty.
Right.
So if somebody is willing to review this and come up with a more comprehensive policy which apparently will benefit industry as a whole, one shouldn't object to that either, because otherwise the assumption is that whatever exists is the right thing. But how do you assume that what is existing is the right thing?
Right. So you're not close to. So what you're saying is you're not opposed to imports being reduced.
No, I hope government will be willing to look at all duty structures relating to the automobile industry, not only import duty,
Right.
and see what is the duty structure which is best guided towards growing the industry as a whole.
So just your thought, what do you think on the duty structures right now, the tax structure? You've got 5% on EVs, you've got 28 small
I think
cars.
that our taxation structure in India, whether it's import duties, which was based on the protectionist policies which were followed and which has never really been, and the local taxation systems, either the earlier sales tax and
Correct.
excise duty and now the GST, have all been based on still the prevalent socialistic thinking that cars are a sinful luxury product and not to be encouraged.
So you still think taxes are overall high then?
I think so. Overall, I think our whole duty structure, the import duty structure, in many cases has been changed substantially, but not in the car segment. And I'm personally feeling that if this trend towards making it ease of doing business in India continues, and we remove some of the other obstacles towards greater competitiveness of manufacturing in India, which can be done quite easily, I don't think we have to worry about import duties at all.
Right.
I see no reason why we should not compete on merits with anybody anywhere in the world.
Right. Mr. Bhargava, that's quite an interesting point you're making. I know you digressed a bit that. So what you're saying is, I mean, import duties don't necessarily, we should be worried about them and take them as a big barrier, because our manufacturing is so competitive and in fact even cost efficient.
But we have to make sure that the factors which increase the cost of manufacturing in India, which
Are taken care of.
are taken care of, the non-value adding things which we have to do in India today.
Right.
Those need to be get. I mean, for example, you set up a project. It takes thrice as much time in a state to get all the formalities
Approvals.
done than it does elsewhere. Why?
Right.
That can be done. It doesn't require any rocket science.
Right. Infrastructure issues for
Yeah.
exports, logistics, all that sort
A
of
lot of central government issues relating to infrastructure are being sorted out.
thing. Right.
But states, if I have to get an electric connection, the tendering process, the approval of tenders, the work process, it all takes much too long.
Right.
The attitudes of the civil servants have not been changed because we have not yet recognized the importance of creating domain knowledge and experience and understanding of competitiveness in civil servants.
Right.
Those are areas which need attention.
Right. And Mr. Bhargav, just looking to the future, then I want to come back to this on the small car. Electric is now deemed to be the future. It's just a matter of when. Obviously, there's a transition towards it. Different countries are going to be faster, some are going to be slower. We are likely to be last man standing in ICE. Multiple powertrain technologies, biofuels, all that sort of thing. What is your thought on EVs? As a nation, are we going along the right way? And obviously now you all have committed a lot to EVs as well, and we're going to see your first lot coming out in 24-25 too.
See, EVs are obviously a technology which has come to stay for many decades. It's not going to go away. And but we have to see how, in the Indian conditions, we best approach the task of lowering the carbon footprint in the transportation sector. And as we have been saying, and Suzuki has been saying, in India, we need to look at multiple options of technology and not put all our bets
Eggs in
on
the
one
EV basket.
horse.
Yeah.
And electric cars have obviously long-term value, but we have also recognized that electric cars in India are run by electricity which is generated up to 75% by burning coal. And with the demand of electricity going up because of economic development, how soon we will actually get where the coal-fired energy is less than 50%. It's not very clear to me yet.
Right.
Also in India, we have options of a huge amount of biofuels, compressed biogas, ethanol. These are the fuels which we need to explore. In the transition period, till electricity is generated more cleanly, we have the option of hybrids. Hybrids today, with the present mode of generating electricity, are actually cleaner than electric cars in terms of the total carbon footprint.
Right.
So we have to recognize these factors, and we have to have a technology which will deal with periods of time as we go along, as changes take place in all these various factors, and see what is the most efficient way of lowering the carbon footprint. At the same time, developing technologies which will take care of our future needs.
Right. And Mr. Bhargav, I want to end this wonderful interview to where it all started, which is the small car. We are still, you've been a champion of the small car, but clearly data shows that people are wanting bigger cars. That's what the numbers are. Now, you might say that, people still want small cars. There may not be enough choice. But it looks like even regulation is driving small cars out, because they're just becoming that much costlier. Price points are moving up. Look at your own Alto, from where it was originally to what the new one is right now. Do you think, the small car is still going to be here to stay for a long time? Is it still going to rule? Or will it just be a large kind of a segment in, not the biggest segment in the Indian market in the future?
I believe that in a country where two-wheelers are around 20 million a year, and the total population of two-wheelers is around 150, 160 million two-wheelers. the people who want to move up from two-wheelers to a safer, more convenient form of transportation have to buy cars. There are people, if they're graduating from a two-wheeler, they cannot graduate suddenly from, let's say, a 1 lakh or 1.5 lakh two-wheeler to a 12 lakh bigger car or an SUV. Also, the infrastructure in Indian cities, and as more and more people have access to cars, is not conducive to large cars. There will be issues of parking and movement on the road. And India is not a country where you can do what China did, demolish
To make wider roads everywhere.
and build big highways and things. Not going to happen here. Our political system is different. So I think small cars will be the answer going forward to a lot of personal
But the data isn't showing that right now.
That is because I believe this is a temporary phase. The increase in prices of small cars was really a one-time event.
With multiple regulations coming
Because
together.
all BS6 came
Safety
and CAFE came and all of that came and safety regulation. But I believe that now as time passes, the incomes of all these people who are two-wheeler owners and things will keep increasing. The car prices will not increase in that manner.
So what you're saying is your small car prices, the delta with no regulation change will be, I wouldn't say static, but it'll not be some huge hikes like we've seen in other.
Exactly, like what we saw when the regulations came. And therefore, as the people's income keep increasing, their ability to move up to a car will again come back.
Right.
What was lost 4 years ago will again come back. It may take 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. I can't say how long. It depends how the economy grows and how equitable the distribution of income growth is. But I do believe it will come back.
Right.
I do believe also that the other car growth will continue because India is not one market. The point you have to remember is that India has a market, one segment of the market, which is similar to any market in any developed country. We have a second market, which is a middling kind of market, which is like Indonesia or countries similar to that. And then there is this scooter type of market.
The India and Bharat, like you always have said.
It's actually 3 markets now. It's not even India and Bharat. And I think the Bharat market has to be treated differently.
Right. And Mr. Bhargav, last question. I'm going to put you on the spot here. Which is your favorite Maruti, or let's say the Maruti product closest to your heart for whatever reason? It could be, I don't know, is it this the first one because that's what started it, or, you know, just one model that's been very special to you?
No, all models are special to me. Maruti is special to me. That's a different issue.
But everyone has a personal preference for some reason.
Obviously, no question that the car which drove our success and which drove India's motorization and which made a car accessible to large numbers of people in this country was the Maruti 800.
Right.
And it is the car which, in a sense, symbolizes the change of India from the old, obsolete kind of car market to a modern car industry.
And even a regulated, controlled economy.
In a regulated, controlled economy, but it happened. So I think it has played a very different role in the market. No other model has played that role in the car market as the Maruti 800 has played.
Right. Bhargav, thank you very much. Real pleasure talking to you as always. Thank you. Super.